A wealthy man stood near the balcony window of his grand home, watching the city lights flicker in the distance like scattered stars. The night air was still, heavy with quiet. Inside the house, everything appeared perfect. Polished floors, soft golden lighting, silence shaped by comfort and control. Yet his mind was restless. He had noticed something unusual over the past few weeks. His maid had been leaving the house late at night, quietly, carefully, as if trying not to be seen. At first, he dismissed it. Everyone has personal matters, he told himself. But doubt is a slow poison. Once it enters the heart, it rarely leaves without damage. Tonight, when he heard the faint click of the back door closing, something inside him hardened. Suspicion. He moved toward the window and saw her walking quickly down the street, her worn bag hanging from her shoulder, the same bag he once mocked for looking cheap and unnecessary. A strange irritation rose in him. Why at night? Why in secret? Without allowing reason to settle his thoughts, he grabbed his coat and stepped outside. Each step he took felt justified in his mind. I deserve to know, he told himself. But beneath that excuse was something darker. Control. He followed her from a distance, careful not to make noise. The streets were still alive despite the late hour. Vendors closing stalls, neon signs flickering, motorcycles passing, crowds thinning but not gone. She moved quickly through it all, head lowered, shoulders tense, not the posture of someone hiding guilt. But he did not see that yet. He only saw mystery. As she crossed a busy intersection, he almost lost sight of her. For a moment, he considered turning back. This felt unnecessary, invasive. But pride pushed him forward. He needed answers. She turned suddenly into a quieter street. The lights grew dimmer, buildings older, silence heavier. His heartbeat quickened. His imagination began crafting stories. What if she was stealing? What if she was meeting someone? What if everything he trusted inside his own home was a lie? The questions grew louder than reason. Then she stopped. Not outside an apartment, not near a hidden meeting, but outside a hospital. He slowed his steps. The bright white sign glowed against the night sky. Emergency entrance. His brows tightened in confusion. She hurried inside without hesitation. Now his suspicion shifted. Not gone, but unsettled. He entered a few moments later. The smell of antiseptic filled the air. The quiet urgency of nurses walking briskly. Muted voices. Beeping machines echoing faintly down corridors. He spotted her at the end of a long hallway, standing still, outside a door marked Pediatric Intensive Care Unit. His breath paused. Something inside him cracked, not fully, but enough to disturb his certainty. She wasn't speaking to anyone. She wasn't hiding anything. She was standing there, hands trembling, her forehead slowly pressing against the glass window, her shoulders shaking. She was crying, silently, alone. He stepped behind the wall before she could see him, and for the first time that night, anger disappeared. Confusion replaced it. Through the glass, he saw what she was looking at, a small hospital bed, machines blinking steadily, and a tiny figure lying still beneath white sheets. His throat tightened. The corridor lights reflected in his eyes, but something else reflected there too. Doubt. Not about her, but about himself. Her worn bag rested at her feet, the same bag he once criticized. Inside it now, he saw her carefully pull out a small envelope. She opened it slowly, counting money, each note handled like fragile glass. He felt something heavy settle in his chest. Doctors walked past her, busy, focused. No one stopped. No one asked if she was okay. She stood alone against a world too large for her. And suddenly he remembered. The day he accused her of stealing, the cold tone in his voice, the humiliation in her silence. He had searched her belongings once, without proof, without compassion, and she had stood there quietly, enduring it. His stomach twisted. What if this was what she had been hiding? Not dishonesty, but pain. A nurse approached her gently, spoke softly. The maid nodded, fear visible in every movement. Then a doctor arrived. White coat, calm voice. He leaned closer to hear. Pediatric surgery, urgent condition, time-sensitive. Each word echoed louder in his mind. Pediatric, surgery, urgent. His heartbeat slowed unnaturally, like the world was pausing to force him to understand something he had avoided. He remembered a photo he once saw on her phone. A little girl, bright smile, sparkling eyes. He had never asked her name, never asked how old she was. never asked anything, because in his world she was simply staff. Now, through the ICU glass, he saw the same child. But this time, she was not smiling. Machines surrounded her. Life suspended between hope and uncertainty. Tears rolled down the maid's face again, yet she stood strong. Not collapsing, not begging, just enduring, carrying a courage he had never recognized. She handed the envelope to the nurse. The nurse opened it, counted, paused, spoke gently. It was not enough. The maid lowered her head, whispering a prayer under her breath. He could not hear the words, but he felt them. And for the first time in years, he felt small, not because he lacked power, but because he lacked understanding. His wealth suddenly felt distant, useless in that corridor, built beside someone who had been fighting silent storms every day, and he had never noticed. Regret began rising inside him like a storm he could not control. He stepped back into the shadows, trying to breathe, trying to process. But the night was not finished teaching him. She made a phone call, her voice cracked, asking for help, apologizing for asking, promising to repay, hoping someone would answer. No one did. Still, she straightened her posture, refusing to fall. Because mothers do not break when their children still need them. He looked through the glass again, and something inside him shifted permanently. Suspicion died quietly. In its place stood a truth far heavier. He had judged her without knowing her battle. And tonight, truth had followed him back. He remained in the shadow of the corridor for several long seconds. The hospital felt colder now, not because of the air conditioning, but because truth has a way of stripping warmth from arrogance. He watched her wipe her tears quickly when another nurse passed by. Even in pain, she tried to appear composed. Even in fear, she guarded her dignity. And that struck him harder than anything else. She wasn't dramatic. She wasn't demanding. She wasn't accusing the world of being unfair. She was simply enduring it, alone. The small figure inside the ICU shifted slightly, and machines responded with soft mechanical sounds. The steady beeping filled the silence, like a reminder that time was moving, whether they were ready or not. The maid pressed her palm against the glass. Her lips moved again. "Stay strong, my love," she whispered faintly. He felt something tighten inside his chest, something unfamiliar. Not anger, not suspicion, but shame. Because hours earlier, he had been irritated about a misplaced document in his office, while she was carrying the weight of a child fighting for her life. Perspective arrived brutally. Memories replayed in his mind with cruel clarity. The time he reduced her salary for arriving late. The day he accused her of being careless. The moment he searched her belongings. The humiliation in her silence. He had mistaken her quietness for guilt. Now he understood it was strength. He could not remain hidden any longer. Each second he stood there felt like cowardice. So he stepped forward, slowly. The sound of his shoes echoed lightly across the tiled floor. She turned. The moment she saw him, fear flashed across her face. Not relief, not anger, fear, even here, even tonight. Her first instinct was job security. She quickly straightened her posture. "Sir." Her voice trembled, but she forced respect into it. He had never noticed how automatic that respect was, how deeply trained it had become. He opened his mouth to speak, but words did not come easily. For the first time in years, he did not know how to lead a conversation. He simply asked, softly, "Is that your daughter?" Her eyes lowered. "Yes, sir." No excuses, no explanations unless asked. He swallowed. "What happened?" Her composure cracked slightly. "She has a heart condition, sir. It worsened 3 months ago. The doctor said she would need surgery, but I was saving. The word echoed painfully. She continued quietly. "I did not want to trouble anyone. I thought I could manage." He noticed she never complained, never blamed him, never blamed life. She simply described reality. "I have been bringing her here at night for tests. I did not want to miss work during the day." Each sentence felt heavier than the last. He remembered scolding her for looking tired, for moving slower some mornings. He had never asked why. The nurse approached again with documents. Surgery must be approved immediately. Payment confirmation is required before preparation begins. The maid hesitated. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the papers. The number printed on the form was overwhelming. He saw it clearly. For her, impossible. For him, a minor transaction. That contrast pierced him. How could something so life-altering for one person be so financially insignificant for another? She picked up a pen. Her hand shook. He stepped closer. Wait. She froze. Fear again. I can take care of this. She looked confused. Sir? He took the form gently from her trembling hands. How much is required? The nurse explained the cost in a calm, professional tone. He did not hesitate. I'll cover it. Silence. The maid stepped back immediately. No, sir. I cannot accept that. Even now, even at the edge of losing everything. Her dignity stood firm. It is too much. He shook his head slowly. No, it is not. She looked at him as if trying to understand his sudden change. I will repay. You don't owe me anything. The words surprised even him. Because they were not charity. They were confession. He lowered his voice. I owe you an apology. Her eyes widened slightly. He continued. I misjudged you. I doubted you. I accused you. And while I was questioning your loyalty, you were fighting for your daughter. Tears filled her eyes again. But this time they were different. Not only pain, but recognition. I should have asked. I should have listened. His voice was steady, but guilt shook underneath it. Please allow me to do this. Not as your employer. As someone who was wrong. She looked down at the floor. Her pride battled her desperation. He could see it clearly. She had survived this long without asking for help. Accepting it felt like surrender. He softened his tone. This is not pity. It is responsibility. That word changed something. Responsibility. Because in truth, he had the power to change this outcome. And choosing not to would be another form of blindness. After a long pause, she nodded slowly. Thank you, sir. But he shook his head gently. Not sir, not tonight. The nurse proceeded quickly once confirmation was given. Forms were processed. Payments arranged. Medical staff began preparing with renewed urgency. The energy in the corridor shifted. Hope entered quietly. The maid sat down heavily in the waiting chair. Exhaustion finally claiming her posture. He sat beside her. Not across from her. Beside her. A subtle shift, but meaningful. Minutes stretched into hours. The red light above the operating room door turned on. Surgery had begun. Silence returned. But this silence felt different. Shared. Heavy. Honest. She folded her hands in prayer. He had not prayed in years. Yet tonight, without realizing it, he whispered something inside his mind. Not for wealth, not for success, but for a small child he barely knew, and for the chance to become better than he had been. Time slowed painfully. Every tick of the clock echoed too loudly. Every passing nurse caused their heads to lift in anxious anticipation. He offered her water. She accepted quietly, their shoulders nearly touching. No hierarchy, just two human beings waiting. At one point, she spoke softly. I did not tell you because I feared losing my job. The statement was gentle, but it struck him deeply. He had created an environment where honesty felt risky. He nodded slowly. That will change. She looked at him carefully, unsure whether to believe it. But something in his posture was different now. Less rigid, less commanding, more present. The surgery light remained on. 3 hours. 4. The longest hours he had experienced in years. And in that waiting, his transformation was completing itself, not dramatically, not loudly, but internally. He understood something he had never considered before. Power without empathy is emptiness. Wealth without awareness is blindness. And authority without compassion is cruelty disguised as discipline. The red light finally switched off. Both of them stood immediately. The operating room doors opened. The doctor stepped out, removing gloves slowly. His expression was calm, measured. They could not read it. The maid's hands gripped together tightly. The doctor spoke. The surgery was successful. The words felt unreal for a moment, as if the world had paused before allowing relief to enter. Tears burst from her eyes instantly. She covered her mouth, unable to contain the wave of gratitude flooding her body. He felt his own breath release, a tension he hadn't realized he was holding. But recovery will require careful monitoring, the doctor continued. The next 48 hours are critical. She nodded repeatedly. Thank you, thank you. They were allowed inside briefly. The child lay still, machine steady, breathing assisted but stable. The maid approached slowly, took her daughter's small hand gently. I'm here, she whispered. The tiny fingers moved slightly in response. That small movement felt greater than any business victory he had ever achieved. He remained near the doorway, watching, learning, witnessing a strength that wealth could never purchase. When she turned back toward him, her eyes were filled with something new. Not fear, not distance, but gratitude, and perhaps forgiveness. He lowered his head humbly, not as hero, but as student, because tonight had taught him more about humanity than decades of success ever had. The next 48 hours felt longer than the entire night that had brought them there. Hospitals have a strange way of stretching time. Every minute feels fragile. Every sound feels significant. The maid barely slept. She remained beside her daughter's bed, whispering soft reassurances, adjusting the blanket, watching the monitors as if her eyes alone could protect the numbers from dropping. He did not return home. That surprised even himself. His phone buzzed constantly, business calls, meeting reminders, financial updates. For once, none of it felt urgent. He silenced the device, sat quietly in the corner of the hospital room, not speaking much, just present. Presence, he was learning, can be more powerful than solutions. The child's breathing remained steady. Machines blinked rhythmically. Life was holding on. Occasionally, nurses would check vitals, adjust medication, offer brief professional smiles. The maid thanked each of them sincerely, never demanding, never complaining. Even in exhaustion, her gratitude remained intact. He watched her carefully, and he began noticing things he had overlooked for years. The way she folded blankets neatly, even in a hospital chair. The way she wiped her tears quickly so her daughter would not wake to fear. The way she sat upright, refusing to lean fully into rest, as if strength itself was a responsibility she could not put down. Strength. He had once mistaken her silence for weakness. He understood now how wrong he had been. On the second day, something shifted. The child's fingers twitched again. Her eyelids fluttered weakly. The maid leaned forward immediately. "My love, I'm here." Slowly, painfully slowly, the little girl opened her eyes. Confusion at first. Then, recognition. A faint smile. Small, fragile, but powerful. The maid broke down quietly, tears falling onto the bedsheet as she kissed her daughter's hand again and again. He felt warmth rise inside his chest. Not pride, not ownership, but relief. True relief. In that moment, something inside him settled. Hope had survived. Later that evening, as the maid stepped out briefly to speak with a nurse, he remained by the child's bedside alone for the first time. The little girl looked at him with curious eyes, too weak to speak much. "Your mother is very brave," he said softly. The child blinked slowly. He hesitated. "I'm learning to be brave too." It was not a sentence he ever imagined himself saying, but it felt honest. When the maid returned, she noticed something different in him. Not dramatic, not exaggerated, but softened, less guarded, less distant. The following days passed steadily. Recovery continued. Color returned slowly to the child's face. Strength came back in small measures. And each day, he visited. Not once did he mention money. Not once did he refer to it as help. There were no reminders of debt, only quiet consistency. On the 5th day, the doctor confirmed they would be discharged soon. The maid stood outside the hospital building, holding her daughter gently in her arms. Sunlight touched her face. It was the first time he saw her outside the hospital environment since that night. She looked different, not because her struggles had vanished, but because hope had replaced fear. She turned to him. "I do not know how to thank you." He shook his head slowly. "You already have." She looked confused. "You showed me something I should have known." She waited. He continued that every person carries battles we cannot see, and suspicion can destroy what simple understanding could protect. Her eyes softened. "I never wanted you to feel guilty." "I know," he replied quietly. "That's why I do." A small silence settled between them, not awkward, but meaningful. "Things will be different," he added. She did not ask how, but she would soon see. When she returned to work weeks later, she expected the same environment, the same rigid expectations, the same emotional distance, but something had shifted. He greeted her personally, not formally. He asked about her daughter, by name. He had learned her name. He adjusted work hours without hesitation, created medical support coverage for all household staff, introduced emergency leave policies, raised wages quietly. But more importantly, he changed his tone. He listened. When another worker requested time off, he asked why, not suspiciously, but sincerely. He stopped assuming. He started asking. And slowly, the atmosphere in the house transformed. Fear dissolved. Respect grew, not forced respect, but earned. Because authority built on empathy feels different. It feels human. One afternoon, he found himself standing near the same balcony window where suspicion had once grown. The city lights looked the same. The house looked the same. But he was not the same. He thought about that night, how easily he could have turned back, how easily he could have chosen ignorance, how pride almost kept him blind. And he realized something quietly profound. Redemption does not begin with generosity. It begins with humility. The maid's daughter recovered fully over the following months. She returned to school. Her laughter filled their small home again, and sometimes on weekends he would receive a short message, "She is smiling today," or "She ran for the first time." Those messages meant more than business profits ever had, because they were reminders of transformation, not only hers, but his. Suspicion destroys silently. It builds walls without evidence. It creates distance without understanding. He had almost allowed suspicion to define a loyal woman's character, and in doing so, he had nearly lost his own. But understanding rebuilds what judgment breaks. One night in a hospital corridor taught him more about humanity than years of wealth ever could. Because wealth can solve problems, but compassion changes people. The hospital hallway that once witnessed his arrogance now held the memory of his awakening, and he never forgot it. Sometimes redemption arrives painfully late, but when it does, it asks one question: will you protect your pride, or will you protect someone's dignity? He chose dignity, and in doing so, he regained his own. This was not just a story about a maid and her employer. It was about unseen struggles, about silent sacrifices, about how quickly we judge what we never try to understand, and about how one decision to step forward instead of walking away can change more than one life. Because sometimes, the person you doubt the most is the one carrying the heaviest burden. And sometimes, the greatest transformation happens not in the one who suffers, but in the one who finally learns to see. If this story touched you, comment one word: empathy. Tell us what time it is and where you're watching from. Like, subscribe Momentum Stories, and return for the next unforgettable journey. Because the world doesn't need more suspicion, it needs more understanding. And the next story might just change you too.